There's a lot of rage being displayed by many of my fellow cisgender white men.
Oh, well I wonder why, Steve. It couldn't possibly be because they've been labelled as the worst thing in the world and the causes of all the world's ills. They're cancer, they're the devil, they're evil, colonialist, racist, sexist, misogynist, bigots that just everywhere they touch turns to shit. Their problems are ignored, their feelings are ignored. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're feeling pretty ragey right now, but then again, your fellow white cis males, I'm pretty sure they have nothing to do with you, and likewise, you have nothing to do with them, as you're all individuals. But hey, whatever, continue, Steve.
You see it on a daily basis on the internet. You saw it during this most recent US presidential campaign.
Again, as I keep saying, most of Trump's supporters were white women, although, of course, a great deal of his supporters were, of course, angry white men. And whose fault was it that they voted for Trump and not the Democrats? You know, the traditional party where white working class men are supposed to be voting for, but instead turning to the Republicans, who, as we know, don't usually have the working man's best interests at heart, traditionally at least. I wonder whose fault that was. It couldn't possibly be the people like you who were demonising them 24/7 in the media for the last, I don't know, 10 to 20 years? I don't know. I'm utterly clueless, Steve.
And I suppose I could answer that rage with some of my own?
Well, I wouldn't call it rage coming from you, Steve. More beta whining, but whatever. Go on. You're ragey as well. You're gonna answer rage with rage. Go on ahead. Go on ahead. Demonise these people. Go on.
But when I really think about it, it's not so much that I'm mad at them. It's that I feel sorry for them.
Oh really, Steve? Since when did you, of all people, decide to feel empathy and sympathy that you have designated as the enemy? The white man, the white cis man, the white cis straight man, to be precise. Although gay men are getting lumped into that as well. Since when did you, up until now, show any empathy or any sympathy for their issues or problems? No, you're not interested in hearing about their stories or their issues. You're more interested in bleating about the progressive stack and all that bullshit. But hey, this is news to me. Explain.
Here are 5 sad things about angry white men. Number 1, they're ignorant.
Oh really, Steve? You of all people are going to tell us that the whole demographic of white straight men, or at least what you perceive to be white men, are ignorant? What are they ignorant of? Which I'm assuming you're going to answer. But I just find that so hypocritical and an example of your lack of self-awareness that you are going to tell white men that they're ignorant.
In the mid-18th century, the English poet Thomas Gray wrote, "Where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise."
So what you're saying is that white men choose to be ignorant? Ignorant of what, exactly? Oh, by the way, Steve, quoting English literature is not going to make you sound any smarter.
Gray was reflecting wistfully on the innocence of youth, but in a different context, he could easily have been describing the angry white men who formed the backbone of Donald Trump's base of support during this year's US presidential election.
Again, this is not about feeling sorry for white men or angry white men, because remember, feminist white men and social justice white men are not angry at all. They're just going out rioting because they didn't get the president that they wanted. No, the happy white men who have won the election, who feel that maybe their issues will be addressed by a president who claims to support them, who claims to speak for them, are the angry ones. I mean, sure, they were angry before that, but now there seems to be an optimism in that camp, but Steve wouldn't know that because he's blocked them all. So how exactly are they ignorant for voting for Trump? And by the way, again, they did not form the backbone. Most of his voters were women, white women, and he had plenty of minority support as well. This is a myth that you are trying to propagate, that it was some kind of straight, white, angry voter base that lost Hillary the election and therefore elected literally Hitler. This is not a video for you to feel sorry and empathetic towards these people. This is you showing your bigotry to them, to telling them what they did wrong and how they should feel bad for doing it, and calling them ignorant, even though I'm pretty sure most of them are not ignorant, that they're pretty well-informed men and made the decision to vote for Trump based on the 2 candidates, their policies, or lack thereof, and also the country at large and how that would impact them and everybody else and how it will solve issues. But hey, no, they're ignorant. That's why they voted for Trump. It's not like Hillary's only real thing was vote for me because I've got a vagina, and loads of women did so, and feminists, and also men like you because you had a vagina. If that's not ignorant, I don't know what is.
It's not just what these men don't know that makes it sad. It's what they are happy to not know.
You know, rather than just blaming them for electing Trump and quoting English literature and then saying that they're ignorant and they don't know a lot of things, that they're willfully ignorant, why don't you actually just go ahead and tell us rather than save it for last? Come on, just tell us. Get to the point.
They are extremely skeptical of science, except when they perceive it to reinforce their pre-existing biases.
I'm sorry, but is this a pot calling the kettle black here? Am I not witnessing a social justice warrior tell me that the other white men who are the enemy of the SJWs only believe in science when it confirms their preconceived biases? So when feminists go on about how gender is a social construct and all that bullshit, so when feminists see surveys that don't actually, so are you saying that feminists don't jump on surveys that prove their points? Like, even if they're wrong, for example, like gender is a social construct, or women are like this, men are like that they don't then jump on that and use that to confirm their biases? Seriously? Really? But of course, you would know that these white men, these nebulous white men, only use science when it confirms their biases. Of course you would know. You talk to these people. You listen to these people. From an echo chamber, no less. But you listen to them.
They care little to nothing about the experiences of people different than they are.
And yet more wild assertions from Steve, but considering that we actually have you on record proving this to be the case, and you're not the only one in that SJW sphere of YouTube and in the world at large, none of you have shown any inkling of care towards their issues, and you're not showing any now. You have literally no idea what these people think, what they care about. This is you using your own bias against them, but hey, whatever, it's okay when you do it.
Their knowledge of history is narrow, shallow, and warped by the narratives of conspiracy theorists.
I know that every Steve Shives video is just projection, but come on, this is taking the piss. These so-called white people, who he's basically turning into an ideological demographic, an ideological group, basically view history from a warped conspiracy theorist point of view, yet this is a feminist and a social justice warrior telling us that this is what they believe, even though he has no fucking clue what they believe, because he doesn't listen to them, doesn't talk to them, because he's blocked them, because he reads the mainstream media, funnily enough, and then decides that that's gospel, and this is how they think. Really? This is the same person who's from the same ideology who believes that only white people were slavers and that women were oppressed throughout the whole of history ever, and doesn't take into account that maybe some of these roles were forced upon both genders through the necessity to survive during the prehistoric era and through early ancient human civilization, and that many different civilizations had their own opinions and ideas on how men and women should have their roles in society. But hey, no, it's all the same. It's all one gender oppressing the other. That's totally not some kind of conspiratorial view of history or a wrong view of history. Yeah, whatever, Steve.
Having said all that, it almost goes without saying that, number two, they're easily led.
That may be true for most of them, but that's also true for most social justice warriors and feminists. I.e., you, Steve. You are a prime example of being easily led.
Easily and often. Right-wing politicians and pundits are constantly manipulating white male voters with narratives about liberals coming to take their guns.
And left-wing ideologues are telling them that they are the devil, that they are the causes for all the ills in society and the world, and that they're evil, they're trash, that they should vacate power and vacate jobs for other ethnicities based entirely on race and nothing more. And I could go on about that. And it's not like the right-wing don't also try and scare women, and they don't also try and bring in minorities to their own side and tell them about the people they should be scared about, or how the left wing are doing similar things as well. It couldn't be that possibly, just maybe, the two sides are both as bad as each other when it comes to this type of behaviour. But hey, what do I know? What do I know?
Immigrants stealing their jobs, labor unions destroying industry, or welfare recipients bleeding their country dry.
And yet the Democrats have been just as bad as the Republicans in taking away people's welfare and outsourcing jobs, when the whole point of a party like that is to protect the unions and the jobs of working people. Instead, they demonise these people, these white working class quote-unquote angry men who you are demonising here, and this is who I assume you are talking about. They demonise these people. They tell them that they are the reason why women are oppressed, why black people are oppressed, why Asian people, the most successful ethnicity in the USA, are oppressed, why everybody is oppressed. And what's funny is the Labour Party, when they were ran by Tony Blair and later even Gordon Brown, also tried to curtail immigration in some capacity, and also were very big on cracking down on benefit scroungers. But hey, whatever, it's not like politics isn't nuanced and one sect believes in one thing and one in another. Yeah, it's totally just completely linear.
Year after year, the fears and prejudices of these men are used to persuade them to vote against not just the common interest of the country, but against the interests of themselves and their families.
Yeah, again, Steve, what are these needs? What are these things that are for the good of the country that they're being told to vote against or to not allow the rest of the country to have? And what are these things that are going to be taken away because they voted a certain way? And again, you're blaming them for all these problems that you have actually caused. And again, the Democrats have done the exact same thing with the Clinton camp, telling people like you, minorities and women, to vote a certain way because apparently literally Hitler's about to be bloody elected. Are you telling me that they don't fearmonger as well? That they weren't? And that they still aren't? Come on, have you not seen the aftermath? That was total fearmongering.
And why? Why are they so easily led?
Well, it's simple politics 101, Steve. On one side, they've got a whole bunch of people telling them that they're evil and they're the causes of all the woes of their country and their planet, and that they're voting against the interests of their families and women and minorities, and they don't care about these people, even though most of them pretty much do care about them, because lo and behold, they may have actual family members who are minorities. They might have friends, close friends, work colleagues, neighbours, politicians that they support who happen to be like that, but they're being told that they don't care. But then they see on the other side an inviting party who claims, even though it's unknown and usually they don't help these people anyway, that they will help them, that this time that they have the solutions to all their ills and that they will listen to them and they will not demonize them, will not do this, they will not do that, and then they vote that way. Because not only do they appeal to just their needs as so-called white men, but they also cater to their needs as Americans, as family people, as workers. Even if it isn't the right thing for them or even the country, potentially, they in their heads think that. And they've seen what your camp tells them and think, well, why not? Lesser of two evils. And so they vote that way. It's really that obvious. But Steve, what do you think?
Well, in addition to their aforementioned ignorance, there's also the fact that, number 3, they're insecure.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why the Democrats lost the election, they have lost a key part of their vote, and why the left has lost its way and why we're pretty much fucked, because for some reason we can't seem to get this lot, and worryingly quite a lot more than just them, to realise that demonising a particular group of people and ignoring their issues for decades leads to shit like this, basically. And again, how are they insecure? This is a whole demographic of people. Remember, this is a collectivist argument that you're doing, Steve, so how can every single individual be insecure? And this is just projection from you, Steve, because if anyone's insecure, especially from what we can gather from your videos, especially with your wife, your lovely wife, you're the insecure one.
For generations, white men have been told that women's liberation, racial equality, LGBTQ equality, and multiculturalism are going to destroy their way of life.
I'm pretty sure you pulled that right out of your ass, Steve. Now let's just get one thing clear here. When the racists in the South were talking about how their way of life was being threatened, they weren't talking about the Northerners, they were talking about themselves in Alabama, in Louisiana, in Mississippi, places like that. They weren't talking about the Northerners, because the Northerners had already lived in a non-segregated society. They didn't live in the way that the South lived. And even then, they didn't speak for all Southerners, who happened to be white. They didn't at all. And with gay rights, that was to do with the religious people, who weren't all white. There's a huge homophobic problem in Latino and African American communities, but hey, you're gonna just ignore all that because it's white men that apparently have an issue. Even though there clearly are white homophobes in the world, they're not the only people that exist who are homophobic. And most of them happen to be religious, and that's the context in which it mostly applies. I think most normal straight white men don't give a shit, and they probably have friends who and family members who are gay, and would object to you asserting and labelling them as homophobes and being told that that's what they're being told. Likewise, with the whole women's rights thing, it was only really the vote that garnered reactions like that, and that was usually from the more older generation who were set in their ways. As for the other things in the 60s and the 70s, that had much more support and more than the older one. Again, Steve, you don't know what you're talking about, and what's this got to do with insecurity? And who's saying this to them?
They've been told that their governments are too big.
You know, the whole thing about big government, small government, that's all open to interpretation, and that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, Steve. I think there's a lot more worse things that you could point to that the Republican Party believe in that's really bad. That's not really one of them.
They've been told that the President of the United States is secretly a foreigner who collaborates with terrorists.
Ironically enough, that whole thing, at least with the birther statement, I don't know about the collaborations with terrorism, considering he killed Osama bin Laden. But hey, you know what? America, both Democratic and Republican presidents, have always supported terrorism in different countries. They did it with the Mujahideen, they did it with loads of other countries in the Cold War. Just too many to pick. I mean, you could argue that a lot of the so-called rebels in Syria, and especially ISIS, are of a direct result from the arming of terrorists and crazies by the American government, but that also goes back to Bush. But the birther thing was started by Hillary, your lady and saviour. Isn't that ironic, people?
They've been asked rhetorical questions like, why is there no White History Month? Or why is it that the only group of people not allowed to be proud of who they are white people?
Now you see, Steve, a rhetorical question is not meant to be answered, nor is it really a question. These are legit questions that people have actually posed. These are actual questions. Now, in my opinion, we should do away with all that bullshit, because it's just nonsense. You're being proud of something that you have no control over. It's just melanin, it's just... And many of the stuff that to be proud of being a particular thing is also universal of other human beings. So it's just pointless to be proud of that stuff. But if you want to be proud of it, go on. As long as you don't go about it the wrong way, which quite a lot of white and black nationalists seem to do so. But hey, whatever. Apparently it's a rhetorical question.
Or why is it that no one cares when men are abused?
Oh great, so now you're going to conflate the men's rights movement and egalitarianism by proxy with right-wing ideology, even though it's non-partisan and you can be left or right and support that thing. That's nothing to do with being white, especially since we don't talk about black people or Latino people or mixed race people or Asian people who happen to be male and who happen to be under abuse. We don't talk about any of them unless it's brought up by one person at any given time. Like, we don't have huge nationwide debates on it, and when we try to, it's usually being shut down by feminists. This is nothing to do with colour. This has nothing to do with right-wing or left-wing ideology. This is human rights.
Or why don't they appreciate all that we've done for them?
Well, considering it was white men that did build a lot of the inventions and came up with a lot of the philosophies that we take for granted these days, I think, yeah, we probably should be a little bit grateful. At least to those individuals. I don't think we should be collectivist and praise the whole race over it, because it was just individuals who happened to be white who did it. But I think what people are trying to get is we should stop being so hateful. Or rather, you should stop being so hateful towards these people, considering the amount of good they've done as well as the amount of bad, because it's no more, no less than any other group of people on the earth. But hey, whatever, they're the devil.
Despite belonging to perhaps the most privileged class of people that has ever lived.
Oh, again with the neo-Marxist bullshit. White people, black people, Asian people are not classes. They have nothing to do with anything like that. It's all about economic power. And by the way, Asian people are the most successful people in the US. So they're actually, by your standards at least, the most privileged people in society. Even though, in actuality, considering the statistics, it's women, considering they're the ones who do better in education. And up until certain life choices like pregnancy or certain ages, they out-earn men in their age brackets and industries, and they have loads of work programs and affirmative action practices, and the same with ethnic minorities. So how are white people privileged? But hey, whatever, people, the facts don't come into this, obviously.
White men have been convinced that they are about to lose everything.
You know, Steve, maybe these white men that you talk about don't have anything to lose, and that's why they vote for people like Trump, because they think they will gain something. But of course that never got into your head, because remember, they already have everything by virtue of being white and reasons.
And number 4, they're afraid.
Everyone has fears, Steve. Everyone has political fears. But of course, you're going to assign a whole bunch of political fears on a whole demographic, which, by the way, strangely enough, doesn't apply to you and doesn't apply to other white men like you. Why? That doesn't make sense. Why don't you just say working class white men, which, by the way, would be an acknowledgement of economic disprivilege, so we can't have that. That would destroy his whole cultural Marxism bullshit anyway. Or conservative ones. Why is it angry white men? What is an angry white man? You could be considered an angry white man. You're angry at perceived oppression that doesn't actually exist. So you are by definition an angry white man, right? But of course, you're going to say that they're afraid of stupid stuff like LGBT rights and racial equality and all that, aren't you? That's what you're going to say.
Convinced that they are threatened from all sides by assorted political and social forces that are attacking their values, their masculinity, their place in history.
All throughout this video, you have yet to define what any of these things that these people believe in, other than Trump, but then again, how many of these people actually voted for him in the first place, who are angry white men? I don't know. Many of them could have abstained or voted Gary Johnson or Jill Stein. What are these values that they hold? You don't know that. That's why you don't explain any of this bullshit. It's all nebulous and unclear and open for interpretation, it seems, although you're trying to kind of infer things. And by the way, it's not just their masculinity that's being attacked. Every man's masculinity is being attacked by people like you. Why do you think toxic masculinity or masculinity so fragile exists, if not to attack masculinity? And well, they're not being attacked by social forces, they're being attacked by political forces in the mainstream media, which you tried to lampoon in that little meme of yours, which failed spectacularly because that was only one man. I think it was Aaron Clary or another person from the PUA website, Return of Kings. That was one man, not a whole demographic of men who happened to be white. That was one man. Socially, there's nothing happening to them. They're still in the same place they were years ago. So what have they got to lose socially? I don't get it.
Many of my fellow cis-hetero white men aren't merely scared, they're terrified. They fear the progress made toward equality every day by Black Americans, Latinx Americans, LGBTQ Americans, Americans who follow religions other than Christianity.
I'm sorry, but only racists would be afraid of racial progress. Only Christians would be afraid of threats to their own dominance by other religions. Atheists wouldn't have a problem with that. Neither would, I don't know, pagans. I reckon a lot of those white men are probably agnostics or don't care about religion whatsoever. And why would these men, who you have no idea what they think about these issues, would feel? You don't know. Maybe they don't care about this progress. Maybe they support it. And they're your fellow white men, right? So therefore you can speak on behalf of them or speak about them as if you have authority when you don't. You're an individual. Talk about a whole demographic of individuals. This is ridiculous.
Women, and pretty much any other group with which they can't personally identify.
Why is it that you people always assume that other coloured people and women somehow get along in a sort of kumbaya kind of thing? 1. Latinos don't like black people and vice versa. Asians don't like black people and Latinos and vice versa. People of all colours can be racist, believe it or not. And not all women like each other either for similar reasons. And let's not forget that some cultures have particularly backward views on women, like Islamic cultures. Why is it always white men that are saddled with this reputation of being sexist, misogynist arseholes when hatred of particular genders and races can exist in any person's mind? This is ridiculous. And this is why they don't vote for you, and this is why they hate people like you, because you make videos like this, telling them what they think, telling them what they are, and then they vote for Trump. And they vote for the Conservatives in the UK, and they vote for other right-wing parties or movements because you're demonising them, you're hating on them, you're being bigots towards them, and that's what they do. They become bigots because of your bigotry, and the cycle continues over and over again. This is why so many black people ended up in places like the Nation of Islam or the Black Panthers or anything like that, because of bigotry. It's the same process, yet you are too dumb and too ideologically driven and stubborn to realise that, and it's your own fault. Go dig your own grave.
They fear the cultural changes that they perceive as they see the increasing popularity of films, TV shows, books, and music targeted at audiences other than them.
Then how come there's a massive white following of reggae in the UK to such an extent that a subculture called skinhead culture and mod culture before that as well, before skinhead culture got appropriated by neo-Nazis, especially designed to listen and join in with black culture and music in the UK? That's where it started, and that's why it started. Why is it that Public Enemy and loads of other hip-hop acts and blues artists and rock artists like Jimi Hendrix have huge white followings? In fact, he became massive in the UK first before he went back to his home country. My city's music scene was founded on that, on working together, on being one with the music. Likewise with films, if the film is good, the people will watch it. That's why 12 Years a Slave was so successful. That's why it won Oscars. This is why songs like Ebony and Ivory can make millions, and Thriller. Michael Jackson broke boundaries. Ridiculous to suggest that angry white men are somehow alienated and scared of that, when they're part of the reason why those things are selling well in the first place. There's not enough of those minority people that you think of that can buy all that stuff and make it successful. successful. Most of it's coming from, well, most of the population who happen to be white. So how are they racist? How are they scared of this? If they're consuming it, if they're partaking in it. But then, if they do partake in it, they're accused of cultural appropriation. So what then are they going to do? You're demonizing them for not being racist, and you're demonizing them for being racist. You can't win. This hypocrisy, this double standard. There's a reason why a lot of them are being driven underground and becoming fascist Nazis. Yet you still blame them for it, and not yourselves.
They see all of these things and they fear them, and perhaps most of all, they fear number 5. They're being left behind.
Again, Steve, they do not fear this crap. They do not fear media that may or may not be designed for them, yet still they like it and consume it anyway. They don't care about that stuff. That doesn't scare them. In fact, they like it. That's why. And yes, they do fear some of them that they're being left behind. And why is that, I wonder? I'm sure you've got your explanations for that. And it's totally not just going to be a repeat of all the other points that you said.
And that is sad. It's not sad that their racism is being left behind or their xenophobia.
Oh, you feel sorry for them now after you just demonized them for 3/4 of the video? Oh, and by the way, yeah, we're leaving behind their racism, but we're not leaving behind black racism, or Asian racism, or Latino racism, are we? Oh no, they're still allowed to be racist to white people and each other, because they can't be racist, remember people? It's not like me as a mixed race person that hasn't had to deal with stuff like that from everybody. Hey, but hey, whatever, my experience doesn't count, because I don't think properly compared to them.
Their religious intolerance, their homophobia, their transphobia.
Again, a lot of this stuff also applies to other races that you've mentioned. Black people can be very homophobic, especially in Jamaican communities, and most of them are Christian, funnily enough. Likewise, Asians can be homophobic as well, although they won't usually be Christian, though they can be. There's quite a lot of them. Only Christians have things to fear about things attacking their religion, not white people. You don't have to be white to be Christian. Why is it that you're forgetting all these things? Oh wait, I know why. That's a rhetorical question, Steve. That's what that is. That's a rhetorical question. You're whitewashing, funnily enough, ironically enough, all these bigots who happen to be a different colour than white, who are homophobic and Christian and probably even xenophobic. I remember reading a news article about a couple of years ago about a community in Sheffield, multicultural community, who had travellers settling in their neighbourhood, and that was causing issues, and even Asian people and black people were saying things that you would consider racist because relations were strained with that other community that moved in. But hey, they're not racist because of their colour, remember people?
Their misogyny.
Again, white men are not the only people in the world who can be misogynist and of course misandrous, but remember, you can't be hateful towards men with his ideology. Black people, Asian people, Latinos, these people's different cultures all have different ideas of gender roles and things like that, and it might not be to your liking, but hey, because they happen to be a certain colour, it's okay for them to have those ideas, isn't it? I mean, you always complain about how white people think that Asian women should be subservient, yet that comes from their culture, not white culture. That's where that stereotype comes from. But hey, don't mind me telling some truth bombs.
Their petulant, self-centered, victim-playing worldview.
Says the man who participates in victim culture. Says the man who belongs to the ideology that states that these people are victims because of arbitrary reasons. Yet it's white men that are playing the victim. I'm sure some of them are, and they're stupid, but I see a lot more of that coming from social justice minority people and women than non-SJW white men. That's another case of the pot calling the kettle black, but hey, no pun intended, people, seriously. I'm just using an idiom.
What's sad is that they are being left behind because they would rather hold on to those things I just listed than try to change. And change is difficult. It takes effort.
Only in the collectivist mindset that you have would you claim that most, because you are white after all, white men think that way. You don't even know what most white men think, yet here you are, proselytizing to us that this is what they think, or rather, proselytizing to them what they think. And as I said before, this is why they don't like you. This is why nobody of any race who has half a brain cell likes you and your kind. This is why we label you as bigots.
But it also takes effort to vainly resist every step forward that society makes.
But they're like 50% of most of society in this country. Remember, the other half of that is white women. Yet most of them don't fight this progress. Most of them want to be part of a progressive future where everyone gets along as things come by are. But with you people demonizing them and telling them that they're pieces of shit because they're white, that forces them away from that. It makes them realize that it's bullshit. Your utopian dreams are dashed because of your bigotry. It's not hard to work out. I didn't have to think that much to come to that conclusion. But then again, I think you don't.
The deal is this, fellow white dudes, the future is coming. Just the same as it came for our parents and our grandparents. It's coming whether you like it or not.
God, yet more Marxist bullshit. Get on the right side of history or else. Well, you know what? The last time they said that, the Soviet Union fell. Just saying, mate. And by the way, considering who your president is right now, I highly doubt that the future that you want will come to America. It's going to places like my country and Canada. Funnily enough, we have a right-wing government, but whatever, they seem to really enjoy some of the things that social justice warriors have come up with, because authoritarians have a lot in common with each other, funnily enough. The future that you are promising them is nothing but where they are maligned, they are sidelined in favour of other people based purely on arbitrary factors that have no bearing on them as people. Yours is a world of increased authoritarianism and bigotry, while you claim to be fighting that. Meanwhile, they're desperately turning to another person who may or may not continue the authoritarianism, or maybe he might stop it. I don't know. He's a complete unknown, but they're desperate, and that's why they're turning to him, and that's why you're losing. This is why there's a backlash against you, and that's why the alt-right, whoever they are, and other hard-right ideologies are rising in Europe because of you, but you're too stupid and too arrogant to see it.
You can live in that future, or you can live in denial. The choice is yours. The hardest part is picking only 5.
Well, sadly for you, most of the country chose not to go through with your vision for America and the world. So, really, they've already made their choice, and it's now up to fate to decide what happens after that. So, yeah, you've already failed with that, Steve. Don't go around trying to tell them to, please think about your choice. This is the wrong side of history. You don't know that. Just like you don't know what they think, what they're like, and all that bullshit. The hardest part was sitting through this bloody video. Anyway, people, this has been Chiming Man 93. Like, share the video, subscribe to my channel, donate to my Patreon, and I'll see you all laters. Steve!